Hey everyone, and welcome back to the SaaS community channel, where we talk about the challenges, the wins, the fun of building SaaS products, and we learn from each other. Today I have with me Dustin Coate. Dustin is a product manager at Confluent, where he worked for, I'll let him say how many years, on the observability products for Confluent Cloud. And I think today the role includes metrics, events, notifications, and how customers interact with all of the above. So we brought him here by special request from the SaaS community. They wanted to know what metrics, what notifications, what events to expose to customers versus what belongs internally. And Dustin has been doing it for a long time with a very large range of customers. So we thought he will be the expert to tell us all about how customers think about the metrics that SaaS products expose to them. So happy to have you on the show, Dustin. It's great to be here talking to you.
Oh, nice to be here. And I guess the number is almost 6 years at Confluent, with about half of that in product and the other half in support.
You've seen both sides of the metrics.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
How to give them, and also what happens when you desperately need them and they're not there.
That's right. Yep. That's how I ended up over on the product side in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah. So, let's just jump into the community question. How do you decide what metrics to show to customers in your product?
Yeah, it's a tricky problem to solve. I think the way that I've thought about it is that metrics are kind of where your business strategy, all these decisions that you're making about where your SaaS product fits in the world of metrics, and these observability components are kind of where that meets practicality. So if I've decided I'm going to abstract some infrastructure layer away from the customer and give them value, I can't then tell you metrics about CPU, right? I have to actually abstract that and go into the metrics that the customer can actually affect change on, and give them the right level of visibility. And sometimes that means hard decisions that feel painful at first. And sometimes that means that the customer comes back to you later and like, wow, this is way simpler than I thought it was going to be. Kind of get both ways.
Product strategy, it sounds like you're referring specifically to the mental model that the customer should have when they think about the product, essentially. Like you have a mental model on how to interact with the product. You're trying to get the customer to buy into this mental model, and metrics should play into that. They cannot kind of break some kind of an abstraction wall in that model.
Right. Yeah. You can't, give them the pitch onto why to use your product and then show them something that is a totally different product when it comes to how to operate it. You kind of have to be in the right layer all the way down your product, not just on the slideware.
Yeah, it's interesting because really a lot of infrastructure SaaS really try to abstract, as you said, like the CPUs. And I'm thinking even like if I use, GKE, Kubernetes, they are really trying to abstract the fact that, we have a lot of machines. They want me to think in terms of not even containers, like the pods and so on. And like if I provision a pod, it comes with a bunch of stuff, but like in the network layer, but I shouldn't really think about monitoring the network layer. The problem is that sometimes like the network layer breaks and now what do I do?
Right. Yeah. And that's where we've seen some of our users find out that we are experimenting, right? We don't know the right answer all the time, and they have to be, you're wrong, you should have exposed something else, right? And so what we try to do in those situations is you still have to understand status. Metrics give you a nice view into if some resource is saturated. You have to decide, is the status of that resource or that component of what you're exposing, is that status something that is important for the customer to understand? Is it something that they can affect change on? Or really do what they need is a notification that, hey, something is broken and we will fix it in X number of minutes, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm seeing like you said something that is really key for me. It's like affect change. Do you really want to see something go red on your dashboard that you have literally zero way to do something about? Like, and you can say,
Right.
hey, I would restart a machine, but if I don't have a way to restart the machine, then it's kind of useless.
Right. I think
And
if it goes red and you can't do anything about it, then whoever's can do something about it should tell you when they're going to do something about it. Right. That's yeah.
yes, exactly. On the other hand, you know, those post-mortem blog posts, when people tell you in retrospect what went wrong and how the people did something about that, those are actually extremely popular. People
Yeah.
want to know way more details than what is useful or actionable.
Yeah, I think that that's true. And I think a lot of times, at least when I'm reading those postmortem things, I'm like, man, I'm glad I didn't have to do that. Right. Like that's usually where I end up, but they're really interesting. But I haven't had too many customers, when there's a postmortem or something come back and say, I wish I could have just been in there
What
to
shit is this?
manually rebalance those brokers. Like it's not something that they've asked for, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, really never. But I'm wondering if there's an element of I actually want to see the accident more closely, like if you
Yeah.
drive on the highway and you kind of crane your neck to take a better look at the accident. I wonder if some metric requests come from this. I want I want to take a better look at this disaster going on over there. Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah. And some people are just like curious, right? I want to learn something about how this system works. Can you just tell me? And that's it's a valid thing, but there are other ways to learn that. Right.
Yeah, and you mentioned something super important that we're trying to figure out what metrics customers are just merely curious, but will confuse them and probably shouldn't be exposed, versus which metrics are actually really important. Customers should absolutely know about them. And I'm a bit like, how do you go about experiments? Like, do you just expose two metrics and see which customers are happier after an incident?
Right. So that's always a dangerous game. Yeah. So like A/B testing doesn't really work that well for metrics because once you get a metric out there, it's really hard to take it back. There's a reason why all these companies that ingest metrics make tons of money, because people send the metrics off and then they oftentimes don't look at them again, but they keep getting charged for them. And part of your value is as a SaaS provider is I I'm going to give you just what you need. So how do you do that? I think the way I think about it is I go back to wherever we're supposed to be abstracting from the customer and try to make decisions that way. It's a little bit more challenging because experimenting is hard. And you kind of have to intuit a lot of how do I make this product strategy or the business strategy translate to this pretty technical thing. But it oftentimes you have to wade through a couple of complex conversations with customers and then follow up, give them a month or two with their current viewpoint that you provide and say, do you need a little more information? Then you bleed that little more information out there, because if you try to expose everything and then take things away, it doesn't work.
That's a very good approach. So it's easier to add stuff incrementally. And that's also
Right.
like something we learned in open source. It's much easier to open source stuff than to take anything back
Right.
when you're like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have given that stuff away. Yeah, I guess it's exactly the same lesson in metrics. Like, it's basically you're saying selecting metrics is a one-way door. That's kind of
That's pretty much it. And like you can experiment with how you're presenting the metrics all day long in your UIs or in the API and give people a way to see things a little bit differently. But the actual content, you just have to be careful.
I was thinking like around ways of saying things differently. There's those metrics that you actually need very rarely. Like I say, like I don't need to look at the CPU unless this throughput just dropped, and then I really will need to know if it's the network or the CPU or the disk or what is it.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess some metrics are kind of like really only important in context. So yeah, we're only adding metrics. So one special case is really the case where someone actually already had a system in-house, whether they had their own Kubernetes and migrating to a cloud managed Kubernetes, had their own Kafka, moving over to a Confluent managed Kafka. And then they used to have a lot of metrics. Like they saw everything from number of interrupts per second on the CPU to everything high level. They had SLAs, they had everything in their control. They defined the SLAs, everything. And then they moved to your service. And suddenly they're with your metrics. How does that go?
It usually goes a little bit bumpy at first. So, you have this customer who was used to looking at a dashboard upon dashboard of thousands of different metrics, and they understand some of them they kind of guess at, but they're experts, right? They're experts in this kind of operational stuff, and you're telling them, well, now you get 10 metrics and one dashboard, and it's
and
you
we
know
will
it,
deal with all the problems.
that's right, and they're a little distrustful of that because they know how hard it is, right? Like, and so you have to kind of show them rather than tell them, I think, in a lot of ways. But um, it's always like, hey, this is a problem that you no longer have to worry about. This is now you can kind of put your expertise and all this time that you're going to save into the application layer, or into the, in our case, at Confluent, into the application layer. Or if you're managing multiple services and one of them isn't quite so mature, well, maybe go look at that one and you become more expert at that. There's always more work to do. I think that's
And to be honest, nobody actually wants to be paged more. Like even if I'm in full-time SRE DevOps, I probably won't have stuff to automate.
right.
Like, there's probably like more, I could probably have an open source project that I always wanted to contribute to.
Right.
Like I cannot imagine someone saying, I moved to a managed service and suddenly I miss all those pages.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And we're taking those pages for you now. Like, and you don't have to stress so much. And it's asking them to take a leap, right? And that anytime you do that, you have people who push back, but hopefully you can convince them enough to at least try it. And I have to say, I am not aware yet of a single user who has switched to the managed service and been like, never mind. I didn't like that. I didn't like understanding less about what was going on and just having it just work. I think I'd rather just be on call all the time.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a one-way funnel kind of
right,
thing. Like everything is becoming more and more managed.
right,
And so yeah, I was thinking like it's almost like when you hire a nanny. Like in the beginning, you're like, is she feeding the baby right? Is she
right.
is she holding them right? Like is she taking as good care of them as I would? And then after a while, it's like, oh, it's actually nice being able to go out alone every once in
Right.
a while.
Exactly. Yeah. And I have, 4 kids in my house right now, and it's that would hit close to home.
4 kids. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
And
Yeah.
there's no nanny here. So,
Yeah. Do you
yeah.
have like strong opinions about your baby monitor, like as a result of being in monitoring?
Baby monitor, baby metrics. I have a lot of KPI opinions on babies. Yes.
Are they growing in the right place? Yeah,
That's
I
right.
can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you kind of mentioned like basically exposing very opinionated, very well-designed metrics to customers.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that there is a lot of internals. You're not just taking stuff directly out of Kafka JMX and dumping it off to some API somewhere. What does it actually take to build this kind of product, like internally? If you can just give high-level view of your architecture.
It is it takes sort of a lot of, first, before even you get to how like technically you solve the problem, at first it takes a lot of convincing of people who are experts in the software that not that the users need something more simple. And so you have to first overcome that. And then once you get to
I'm looking
that
at this
point,
picture and I don't like it. I'm totally feeling called out in my own podcast.
unintentional, unintentional. After you get to that point, it's like, okay, now you need to have this, you need to have multiple layers of aggregation. You can't just dump everything into the data warehouse and then kind of expect that solves it for all my internal use cases and my external use cases. I think you need to have, it's no secret we use like Druid internally to serve sort of more real-time aggregates to customers, and for some more, not necessarily real time, but like midterm, I guess, um, aggregates to internal users. And then you have data warehouse where we do more long-term analytics. And then you have to also have some place where you're going to have operational dashboards and presentation layer that runs on something completely different. So you kind of have to look at it. I'm collecting these metrics and events for things. But I need different ways to slice and dice them internally. So you have to kind of understand what use cases you have, not just to customers, but also, if you're metering for billing, you need to be able to, run that billing runner in the same way as a customer would run it if they were doing chargebacks on their own self-managed thing, but you're doing it at scale. So
Yeah.
it's there's some challenges there, but the infrastructure, you just have to be flexible and be willing to process the data um, with different technologies, not just focused on, let's try to do it with one thing and it solves all the problems.
And it even ties a bit into the persona, right? Because the level of data you need, you mentioned billing, the finance guy needs is just give me the bottom line. And then there's probably people who need more drill down. Metrics obviously have to be a lot more detailed than the bills, and maybe even more real time than the bills. And then there's for data analysts, no matter how much they say that they like real time, they once a week, once a day is kind of real time enough usually.
Right. Yeah. Well, and they don't want the report changing all the time because it can get expensive for them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
So they want things that fit into their mental model. You're kind
Yeah,
of providing that platform
they just
internally.
business aggregations are just a totally different type of modeling than
Right.
the data, like real-time metrics aggregation. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, and then, okay, so I'm switching topics out of metrics because the other thing you're responsible for, which is also very much events-based, is notifications. And I have to share with you, like, my biggest notification annoyance at all times, essentially, because it happened years ago and I will never forget, where we may or may not have had an issue with our billing. I will never know that, but our cloud providers thought that we have a issue with our billing, and they basically sent an email to every single user of their cloud, which for us was literally our entire company, saying we're about to shut down all your cloud services, which we didn't know which account, so we didn't know which cloud services, but it could have been customer facing, like it could have been our customers' clusters being shut down, and it was like, I think 2 a.m. or something, and everyone was paged, everyone panicked, and like an entire company. And that was not okay. Like,
Yeah.
like this is something that I think very strongly that vendors should never ever do. But clearly it just shows that even for very large companies, notification was clearly at someone's bottom of the priority list. There was, I
Yeah.
can tell you right now, there was no PM. Like someone just had to, they said, oh, if the bill runs out, you have to notify, just code something. We don't have
Right.
time to actually think about the user experience here.
Yeah. I mean, so the notification stuff uh, is also near and dear to my heart because of being in support for so long. It's like you need to be able to communicate with the customers, and the more you communicate to the right person at the customer, the right user, the better. The more you do it wrong, you just make everybody angry.
The right user, the right information, the right
Right.
time, like all those things really, really matter.
And it's a complex thing to get right. And so we don't have it right yet, of course, but I think it's the way that we've thought about it in like to avoid emailing everybody at the entire company to try to get them to pay a bill, which makes no sense. The way that we're thinking about it is we set up role-based access control. Like you can do that in our product. You set admins for this thing, or you give them a cluster scope or some kind of privilege. If we can notify customers based on the role that they've self-selected, right? They've determined, they've told you what their persona is, what the information they want to receive. So you just give that person that information, right? And you got to be aware that the notifications about marketing stuff and trying to get leads and things, not you send that off to the cluster admin. They're not only they're not going to like that, they're going to unsubscribe and they're going to be
And they can't
irritated.
really do anything about it. And the only
Right.
thing they can do is unsubscribe and then not get notifications they actually need.
Exactly. So you have to like get people the right information. So for operational stuff, then you get the admin, right?
So yeah, there's just so much to unpack here. So I'm going to take it slowly. First of all, there is the internal stakeholders who want to send notifications, who can be, the owners of the products who want to notify about operational things as part of their product. But as you said, like also marketing may want to notify for other reasons. Sales may want to notify. There's probably a growth team somewhere that says like, oh, those notifications will be perfect for onboarding. So you kind of need to get that part under control. And then, as you said, and you brought up something that I've really haven't considered before, but is incredibly important. You took something that was actually designed for security, but you said, hey, there's good information here that is relevant over there as well. And which meant that you actually had to go and talk to the security team, get like who are probably not like they have their own problems and their own focus, and kind of, hey, we should use this also for that. And so let's talk about how did you get everything under control?
Yeah, I think somebody told me recently, like you have to be careful not to ship your Conway boundaries to your customers. And so,
Exactly that.
yeah,
Exactly that. And notifications is really where the method, like when the rubber hits the road, I guess, because
right,
you have all those internal stakeholders and all those products. Like I have
right,
my Kafka notifications, but when Kafka is down, KSQL will probably also not work. Do you
right.
notify for every single product that depends on Kafka that they don't work either? So like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's like
It's
to
very
me,
much a multi-org PM role. Like it's not like I will work with my events team in my silo and design something.
right. And honestly, it took us a long time, like to get to the point where we are, and it's going to be a long road ahead. But it's the right problem to solve, because if you're thinking about it, like let's just send some emails. Well, then I don't think that you're totally doing the SaaS thing, right? You have
Yeah,
to be opinionated about it.
yeah.
And to do that properly takes a lot of alignment across many teams to get everybody on board with the idea that the notifications platform that we're building internally is going to work for all of these different use cases and solve a valuable problem, a valuable user experience problem, but also like a valuable, you know, legal problem. If you have some security incident or something, you need to notify the right people, and you need to see, did this get in the hands of the admin, or did I just send it to the entire organization and wake everybody up at 2 a.m.? Like, I don't want to do that. So
And also the reverse, you can cause a serious issue for your customer if a minor cluster blip is worded in a way that is too scary and gets sent to some kind of a VP because he's the one who signs the bill.
right. So you have to really do a good job of aligning your personas with the roles and understanding who's going to receive what notification
So basically, you
by default.
say if your role is a cluster admin, you are the notifications guy for anything that's wrong with this cluster.
That's right. And you can't get out of it. This is like that you're required to receive these emails. And if you don't like them, then you should probably not be the admin, right?
And
That's
do we check if they open them? Like, can we
right.
just kind of complain to his boss, like this guy does not even bother opening our incident notifications. What are you even doing?
Right. That's part of what we track, right? Is if they have gotten the email and if they've actually seen it, because sometimes we need to know that information. Like if
Oh
we,
yeah, that's
yeah,
actually what has happened before. The customer said, "Oh, why didn't you notify me about this thing?"
right,
And you're like, "Oh, actually, in this date, this date, this date, and this
right,
date." You Yes,
yeah,
That's a very good one. And see, that's why notifications requires the PM. You can't just
right.
follow it. There's just so much customer experience to think about.
It's the primary way that you will interact with your customers. So I think that falls in the PM bucket, right? If customer interaction. Yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like you kind of mix, like you have the persona framework, like if he's a cluster admin, he will need to know about those things. And
Yeah.
then you also kind of have a jobs to be done framework, like in
Yeah.
order for him to be a successful cluster admin, he needs to do those things, and therefore we need to let him know when he needs to do those things. Kind of
Exactly.
framework.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because roles basically let customers tell you their persona. You don't have to.
Right. Yeah. They're telling you, all you have to do is listen, right?
Yeah,
It's, yeah.
that's really cool.
Right.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things about those operational notifications is that people may want to actually, open a support ticket, interact,
Right.
ask, do stuff with them. How, like, yeah, how do you encourage this kind of interaction, basically?
Yeah. So
Actually, what happens when I reply to a notification email?
it opens a support ticket for Confluent
Really?
directly.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. So if you reply to it, it goes right into the support portal, and we can pick it up and talk to you over that. Because like it is about engaging, right? It's about how do we get this customer to talk to us more, and if it talk to us more about the right things. Like we don't want them to yell at us necessarily unless there's something to yell about. But if you get, a notification via email, you can reply and you get a support ticket. We're starting to also put other kind of actions into the notifications. So if you are getting a notification that's like 90% utilized cluster, push this button to go to expand that cluster, right? That's the kind of stuff that we want to do, is like,
So cool.
give
Yeah,
the decision right there in the notification
that,
so that the customer can,
and I bet the sales guys don't object to having
of course not. Yeah.
right
Yeah.
there and then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you also notify when the cluster is underutilized and tell me to shrink it?
I mean, we should. That would be the right thing to do, right? Yeah.
I think so.
So we and that'll be on the list of things that we should do, right? But because it's like then you have to ask the question, why is this cluster not utilized that well, right? Because nobody
Very,
wants to give
very
a big,
much so. Someone has to figure it out. Yeah.
right, and it doesn't make any sense to give somebody a big fat bill and then have them stop using the service. So
And it may
yeah,
be even that connectivity is not working, and you should probably open a support ticket to find out.
right, exactly. So that's all about the engagement part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I actually don't never open emails. I kept talking like I'm getting my notifications via email. I actually don't. I
Yeah.
use PagerDuty and Slack most of the time.
Yeah.
So like, how do you notify? Like, is it like I have to set up Slack notification, or is like there's like a button set up
Right.
Slack notification kind of thing?
So because we have email addresses, because that's how you log in.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So you can't get away from that one. So we always have email available. And that's where we send like required notifications. But the idea with all this enterprise SaaS stuff is customers have a billion systems they're also running. So it's to fit into their scenario. So send notifications to Slack. Sure, just sign up, just subscribe, put it in the Slack channel.
That kind of ties in. If you ever add like social login, like so I can log in via Facebook, I would actually Facebook Messenger.
Live in Confluent Cloud today. Log in with Google. Went live.
That's just Gmail. Who cares?
We're getting closer. Yeah.
Yeah, like sign up with Slack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sign up with Slack. That's a good one. Yeah. But then we wouldn't even. Yeah, we would just be able to directly integrate. But yeah, all of these, the notification sort of ecosystem is very diverse in enterprise. You've got, ServiceNow, PagerDuty, Big Panda, Ops Genie, all these things. And so
Every
we're not
integration game.
right. It's so you got to have all these things because no one's coming to your UI to see if there was a notification, right? You want to fit into their ecosystem.
One last question for you.
Yeah.
A kind of either feature or something that you basically wanted to build into metrics and notifications and event space, maybe since the day you took the role, and somehow it never made it to the top of the priority list, but you still hope that you will be able to do it. I know every PM has one.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. So in one of the big things that I want is for our support teams, because I'm in support at heart, right? I want our support teams to have the same view that a customer has, because inevitably you get on a screen share with a customer and they're showing you what do they have, and
And you have the same thing running in your data center.
Right, we have all of the information. What I just want to be able to say when the customer opens a support ticket, or even when they haven't, just say, you know what, Gwen is a Confluent Cloud customer in this organization. I want to have the Gwen view. I want to be able to ask Gwen, hey, can I be Gwen for 30 minutes and poke around in this thing and understand what you're seeing? If I could do that, now there's all kinds of legal and compliance blockers that you have to cross to get to that. But if I had that, to me, that's not observability in the data sense. It's observability in like the customer sense. I can see what the customer can see, and it's perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have to say, you are the second you are still Confluent. We had Ram Furix earlier. He was ex-Confluent at the time. And when I asked him the same question, like, what did you always want to build and didn't get to? He said the exact same thing.
Oh, really?
He said, I always wanted to have a support PM. I feel like we could have an amazing support portal and give customers better service if we have this really strong support experience, and I never got to do it. It sounds like I don't want to make forward-looking statements for a company I'm no longer in, but it starts looking like something that is coming.
Maybe, I hope so.
Every single person I talk to says, oh yeah, this is totally the things that I feel like we really should be doing. It just, that's kind of amusing to me.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, let's get everybody on board. Just interview more people.
Yeah, I think the next person to interview would be Sam Hecht. I should get him here. So yeah, just for listeners, Sam Hecht is the VP at this point, right?
Yeah.
Who runs worldwide support for Confluent, and I'm just guessing that he would say the exact same thing. Cool. Thank you so much, Justin. I learned a ton, and it was a really, really fun conversation. I hope all the listeners learned something and maybe even have as much fun as we did.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on.